Hi, I'm Van. How you doing? Thought I'd do this one out back, at least the lead into it, because we got to talk for a bit. So I'm like, well, why would I want to talk inside when it's a nice day? I've been working with one person. They've been having some trouble with the idea of getting their patterns, which they're trying to design to repeat in a tubular situation. So before I can even get to a solution, we got to talk about the problem, right? So let's take a look at this. This is a lighter that I did very recently. The important thing to look at here is when you look at this and you cruise around it, in no place is there some kind of seam or something. Everything, it's the same thing over and over, and there's no edges or anything like that. That's called what I call a repeating pattern. All right, just repeats over and over, blends into itself, and looks really cool. So to get this kind of effect, you got to do a little bit of planning, and you got to pick some things and settle on some stuff up front. So how do you do these repeating patterns? Well, first off, you don't start with a lighter. Lighters are 42 beads, and we'll get into why it's 42 in a bit for sure. That's part of this. But you're doing 42 beads for 2 rows. When you make mistakes, it costs you. It costs time. And it might be better if you're having a little trouble with the repeating patterns to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something smaller. Do a necklace, okay? I'm talking about smaller rows. These necklaces actually take longer to make because there's a heck of a lot more beads, but or you could do some practice pieces or whatever to get the hang of it. I do a very specific kind of peyote. What? There's more than one? Heck yeah, there is. There's all kinds of variations on it. Peyote itself is kind of this idea that the beads, instead of being square to each other, they're in a triangle or a zigzag pattern like this. And so whenever somebody says a peyote stitch or something like that, all they're really talking about is the relationship spatially of these beads to each other. And there's a couple different ways to get it done. Now, I do what's called a 2-row peyote. That is, for all the columns, you got to do 2 rows to get a new bead in every single column. The other variation is called the gourd stitch, commonly, and it requires 3 rows to get a bead in every column. And I tried it a little bit, and I suck. You know, it's hard for me. But the 2-row peyote is pretty good. Now, tubular obviously is that, you know, it's one piece of string and it forms a tube as you build it. That's the whole tubular thing. Within 2-row tubular peyote, there's 2 different types: odd count or even count. And literally it means how many columns are there? How many columns of beads? Is it an odd count or an even count? The reason that it's got to be even is because it's that up-down thing, right? If it was odd, say you had like, I want this pattern of 5 to repeat all the way around. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You end on the bottom. Well, the next, you can't repeat that pattern. The next one you have to do is go up, right? So you could do 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, right? If you end on the bottom where you started, you can't repeat because the next one has to go up. Now, how many times you have that pattern, even or odd, doesn't matter, right? These lighters I do, you know, it's 42, 7 times 6. So I do a 6 count, and I repeat that 7 times. 6 times 7 is 42. The simplest way that I've been able to think about to explain what are the requirements to have a repeating pattern, as far as bead counts and all that other stuff, is you have to have a total bead length, you know, the bead count for 2 rows or 3 or whatever, has to be evenly multipliable by at least 3 numbers. At least 3 numbers, and one of those numbers must be 2. The other constraint is that the thing you're going to be repeating, that pattern you're going to repeat, also has to be even. It has to be evenly divisible by 2. Other than that, that's all there is. So when we look at this lighter right here, these covers I do, now I use a bead size of 11, okay? Not all beads are created equal, but I use a bead size of 11, and when I do that, the closest number I can get that works out and the lighter still fits and everything is the number 42. And 42 is 7 times 3 times 2. So, if you play with those numbers some, you'll find out that the only 2 numbers that I can do that are going to be the pattern I'm going to repeat, they could be of 2 sizes. They could be a 6 or they could be a 14. Now I've never done any 14 count lighters yet, 14 count repeating. I'm gonna, after doing this video and stuff, I'm like, I gotta make a 14 count repeating just to see what it looks like. And if you do a 14 count, it will repeat 3 times. And if you do a 6 count, it'll repeat 7 times. So you can see how this math is all working together. So let's do some beading and see what we can do. Okay, we're ready to start trying to do this, and we're going to do what I would generally use for a necklace, which would be a 12 count. 2 rows, 12 count. And real quickly to review tubular peyote, first thing you do is you grab 12 beads that you're going to pull off later and call them starter beads. I generally make them all the same color. It's really not a big deal. That's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's count to make sure. See, that's 2, 6, and 6, that's 12. Done. Alright. And we're going to take those and we're going to come out with our string and go back through the last 2 to loop around. So if you're going to do a 12, 2 row 12, you start with 12. If you're going to do a 2 row 28, you start with 28. Doesn't matter. Alright, so there it is. And let's start with the colors we're really going to use, and we're going to make a black tube to start with. And to review tubular peyote, that's our string coming out that our needle's on. And we're going to pull through until we get our beads near the end of our string. In this case, at least 3 lengths of the needle so we can tie it off easy. So there's the string coming out of this bead right here. There's that string coming out. We're going to skip over the first bead in line and go through the second, just like that. That's the first bead of our first row. Grab another bead, skip one, go through one, there it is. Alright, skip one, go through one, bead number 5. And if we did the next to the last bead right, the next bead in line is where our string's coming out. We can see that. So I feel fairly confident that I've gotten it right so far. Now the very last bead in this row, we're going to go through 2 beads. So there's our bead on the needle. We're going to skip one, go through one, and actually we're going to go through 2. And the second one we go through is the very first bead we laid down in this row that we just did. And there it is. Okay, and that's our first row, 6 beads. Wow, what a piece of art. Just awesome. So, time to start in on the second row. Second row, we're going to ignore the yellow beads, our starter beads, and just go through every one that we laid down. So that's number 1. First bead of the second row goes through the second bead of the first row. Second bead of the second row goes through the third bead of the first row. And the final bead, bead 6 of the second row, goes through the very first bead we ever laid down of the first row and the very first bead we ever laid down of the second row. You can see it right there. There it is. Boom. Okay, we got 2 rows done. Look at that. Doesn't that look like a necklace? You know, that's the way the peyote starts. Starts like a mess. Looks like a train wreck. And it's real easy to get lost. And here I am cracking jokes, and I'm probably going to screw it up again. Notice also I'm keeping this really loose and really flat. I'll start to tighten it up somewhere after this row. So, you can see we've got 12 beads on. We're going to skip a bead and go through a bead of the black. We're not even looking at yellow anymore. We're just looking at the blacks. Alright? So we're going to skip that guy and go through the next one. That's 2. And number 6. We're going to skip this guy and go through 2. There they are. And you can see the thread. It's obvious which one you got to go through once you get the hang of it. Those 2 guys right there. And by the way, that second one's, guess what? That's the first bead we laid down in this row. So that is row 3. We've got 18 beads that we're going to keep, and then our 12 starter beads. All laid out flat as can be. Well, this could be a spot where we could start to tighten up. And you can see I've still got a lot of play. My string's 8-pound test fire line, and these beads are size 11. And we'll go ahead and tighten up and see if we can still stay with it. We may have tightened up a little early. Tightening it up makes it harder to tell which bead you're supposed to go through, but if you don't tighten up at some point, you're going to run into trouble. Because then you won't be able to tighten up. Too much friction. Alright. Row 4. First bead done. What's this mess? Huh? What the hell's going on here? See, this is what happens when you tighten up too early. And the beads aren't quite lining up right. And the tension's not there for it to work right. And you start getting weird stuff happening. Another way to say, how do you know which bead is the right one? Well, because you make so many mistakes going through the wrong one, when you get it right, you start seeing that's right. Alright, that's the first bead of the 5th row. I'm going to speed this up. Starting to get a shape here where it's obvious. Oh, damn it. Yeah, speed it up and screw it up. That's my motto. Yeah, now we're starting to get a build up where it is obvious when you're at the end of the row. There it is, right there, those 2 guys. Okay, let's snug it up a little bit. And when I'm first starting these guys, they're laying flat. As time goes on, things will adjust and it'll be actually a tube. It'll want to keep a tubular shape. But always at the start, it feels kind of flat. You know, I end up holding it where it's pinched like that. And that's okay. Starting in on row number 6. There we go. 8 rows. 8 times 6, we've laid down 48 beads. More math. Yay. I've got 8 rows laid down. So 4 in each column. Nice and even. I think I got a good base where I can start doing some fun stuff. I think I'll start with the most simple. Remember I said every repeating pattern's got to be even. And in this case we've got 2 times 2 times 3 to work with. So what are our even numbers that we could do? We could do 2, 4, 6, and that's it. I mean 12, that is how big it is, so it really wouldn't be a pattern, would it? It just it'd be whatever. Well, so 12's out for doing something like that. Well, what about 2? Well, 2, you can do a repeating pattern, but it's not much of a pattern and it's not too much fun. I'll go ahead and show you. Everyone's going to repeat. There'll be one bead on the first row and one bead on the second row. Eesh. Well, let's just go with yellow. So essentially what it works out to is we'll lay down 6 yellow. Okay, so we laid down half of our beads for the repeating pattern in the first row. And we have 6 patterns of 2. That comes out to 12. So, vertical stripes. That's all you can do. That's all you can do with a repeating 2 pattern. Okay, so we did 4 rows of our repeating pattern of 2, and if you count, you'll see that every other one, and all you can do is a straight line. More or less all you can do is a straight line. Yeah, I mean, you can do little bits of straight lines and other things and get really creative with it, but there's not too many possibilities. And so I typically don't do patterns of 2. Now you got me thinking. I kind of want to try it just to see what I could get done. Let's do something cooler. Let's do repeating patterns of 4. So a repeating pattern of 4, I got 12 beads, right? Well, if I'm going to do a repeating pattern of 4, that means there's going to be 3 of these patterns. Let's do something fun. Let's make little flowers. That's what I call them. So my repeating pattern, the first row is a yellow and a black. And I just do that 2 more times. Now the second row of this thing is kind of weird because you use all the same color for when you do a flower. So it's going to be yellow all the way around. These are the petals of the flower. And there's going to be 6 of them around the center. So you can see after the second row, we've got 3 of our flower petals done. Now we're going to add the middle part and the border between each one. And I'm going to use red as the middle of the flower and black as the border. So that's what we got to lay down. And depending on where we are, we're between 2 flowers right now. So let's add a black. And in the middle of our flower. So look at that. We're 3 rows through. Now we just add a whole bunch of yellow on top. Okay, let's finish off this flower here. Again, it's one of these rows where it's all one color. And then the final row where we put the last top petal, the 6th petal, on, and then more of our border between the flowers. And that's the end of our flower. And let's go ahead and seal it off with some black. And that's that. So that's how you do flowers. So how do you go about telling where the pattern starts and stops? Well, it's kind of arbitrary, but we could pick this black border. That's our first row, or our first column. Our second column is these 2 petals right here. Our third column is these 2 petals in the middle part. And then our fourth column are these 2 guys right here. And you can see that repeats every time. Border, 2 petals, petal, petal, middle, 2 petals, and then it goes around. And it's the same thing 3 times. And that's a repeating 4 on a 12 12 divided by 4 is 3. And there's 3 of these guys. So 4s you can do some stuff with. Let's do another 4 where 4 is the first place where you can start to twist too, where you can have a line that kind of twists. So let's do one of those. I've added a few rows and there's our flower, and we're going to start trying to do the twisting pattern, and just to keep it in the same kind of a style, I'll go ahead and just twist with yellow. So now a twisting for a single, kind of a single color twisting, again that's a 4 pattern. So let's go. So you can see, and then I just slide one over. Now I could go this way, or I could go the other way. You know, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but you can twist in either direction. There's no constraint there. The only constraints are your imagination. And you can see it's starting to curl around, right? Alright, and we'll finish that off with a bunch of black to space it out too. But, so there you can see, this is a, and if you look, there's 3, right? There's 3 of these, but you can see the curve and line. And you know, you could start wiggling back and forth and doing all kinds of stuff. And hey, you know, what if you decided to use green with this? You could have the green come up and feed into a flower, right? And then a space. Another thing is you could do flowers. You could do more flowers that would start in right here. You know, there's all kinds of stuff, even with these little 4 patterns. There's so many different things to do. But you can see in the 2 pattern, oh, you can do straight lines. Yeah, the 2 pattern exists, but there's not a lot of possibilities there. 4 pattern opens it up quite a bit. 6 pattern opens it up even more. It gets kind of like, well, there's all kinds of things I don't even want to try. Let's forget about the possibilities. And that is our next one, is a 6 pattern. And I'll go ahead and make a couple things. One will be a straight pattern, kind of a, let's do an extension of the flower. And then we'll do another moving pattern or twisting pattern like this. I think that will finish it up. But also, let's go ahead and get just a few more rows of black on here. Because we're doing 12, you would have 2 6 patterns, right? So with the 4 pattern, 4 times 3 is 12, 2 times 6 is 12. So you can see I did a yellow, black, black. So the other, I'm going to repeat the pattern again, yellow, black, black. You can see there's kind of like the symmetry on one side or the other. So now we're going to do a whole thing of yellow. And if you remember these rows back here, we were doing a whole row of yellow, but then the next row we'd insert that black, and that's what makes the border. And so you'll see the next row we'll do whatever, but for sure we'll have blacks separating these yellow guys from each other because I don't want them to touch. The neat thing about repeating patterns is I don't have to remember 6 beads on each row. I just got to remember my pattern. Whoops! I added 2 beads instead of 1. Don't want to do that. Now I do a yellow and 2 blacks. Oops. A yellow and 2 blacks does not mean pick up a black to begin with. Alright, and we'll seal this off with a bunch of black. Alright, there it is. You can see, let's count, starting with the border, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the next border, and it's exactly the same. And that's a 6 pattern. But you notice, it's like this 6 pattern down here. It's straight, right? It doesn't twist. So what does a twisting 6 pattern look like? Well, instead of being one yellow line, it would be like 2 yellow lines or something like that with a black border or something like that. But it would give you, instead of going from 2 in the twist, you'd have a distance of 3. So 6 gives you 3, 4 gives you 2, and 2 gives you a 1. You can't do it. So you can see where my string's coming out, that bead would go right there, but I don't really like it right there. I kind of want it to line up where my start of my twisting gives a nice even border on both sides, right? So I'd really like the twist to start on this border right here. So instead of starting with that red right there, we're going to put in black until we get to where we want to start. And you can see I got that red right where I wanted it to, right on that line right there. And also, it doesn't have to be too wide. You could have one line of red going up, you know, just like over here, but instead of having 3 of these guys twisting, you just have one with a bunch of black in between. So I'm just trying to show some basic techniques, and you can just let your mind go from there. Okay, and that's what we do. We just keep drifting along like this. Black, red, red, black, red, red, till we get sick of it. So we've been making this, and you can see it's starting to curl around, and there's 2 of them. Kind of this double curling line here, and this double curling line here, twisting around. Let's go ahead and close it off. And you can see we're finishing this vertical just like we did over here, right? And we could actually, you know, if we wanted to, we could have been starting up another color there, you know, or we could have straightened out for a bit, or, you know, switch to a different color. And you don't have to have 2 colors the same. We could have had like a black, red, and a yellow, or white, or, you know, whatever. Anything goes. And you don't have to keep twisting in one direction neither. You could have zigged back the other way, done all kinds of stuff, right? Alright, so there we have it. Two different kind of 6 patterns. Real obvious. This is kind of a straight, doesn't twist around 6 pattern for this kind of almost hexagon shape there. And then we have a full-on double bar, you know, twisting pattern. But again, you can see the start and stop, and they're twisting around. But if I continued on with this red, you can see it would have gone right on top of the other one, never touching, you know. So that's examples of 6s. And, you know, if you're working on a bigger, say you're working on a 16, you could do 8s, right? And you still get this thing where they're seamless and they don't interfere, and it's the same thing. It gets that really cool repeating pattern look. Now another thing I want to point out is that in this particular lighter, every repeating pattern was exactly the same in all respects. Now shape-wise, that's true, right? But I could have said, you know what, I'm just going to do one individual solid bar of color, or mix it up, or do all kinds of stuff. It doesn't matter in that respect. But with this one and the way that it's going, this is a cool look. Okay. That's really all there is to it. It just flat out looks cool when you do any kind of a fade and do the exact same fade 7 times. You get some pretty neat effects, right? It looks cool. But it could have mixed it up. Sure could have. And I've done a couple lighters where I did that. So here's some other repeating patterns. These were all in stick covers that I was working on. And this was the first one I made. And you can see I just used red and, you know, the 4 basic colors. But if you count, there's 1, 2, 3, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So on this one, it's 6. There's 6 of these things here. But you can see, well, how many is in the repeating pattern? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, 12 times 6. So with these particular beads right here, I was able to fit 72 beads around. Alright, and that's what that turned out. Here's an example of a repeating pattern where you can see the actual shape pattern is this bigger rectangle here, but I got two different colors with a border in between. You know, but when you count on this, I believe it's a 6 also. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's a 6. So there's really 6 of these double rectangles, but I colored each one different. How about that? See? These beads are a little bigger, and I could only fit 66. But you see, I picked that number again. 66 was as good as I could do, and that had 2 times 3 times 11, right? Whereas 72, oh boy, I mean, that's got a lot of multiples in it. You know, 2 times 3, that's 6 times 12, right? Which is 2 times 3 times 2. So I got 3 2s and 2 3s. Wow, you could just do all kinds of stuff with 72, right? But with 66, I was very constrained. Again, it's even worse than it's like 42. It's horrible. I mean, my choices were basically 6 11s or 11. You know, what was it? So it's 66. So I could go with 3 22s or 11 6s or something like that. You know, not as many options. So I elected, because I like that 6, right? It's pretty nice on a 6. These guys down here, it might not look like it, but they're also a 6 pattern, right? You can see that color, 2 whites, 2 medium browns, 2 dark browns, and then it starts over, right? Dun, 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 dun. You know, and then same thing. So, you know, this one's actually, when you look at these, wow, this guy's the one that's really got this cool feature going on where, hey, I stuck with the shape pattern, but I varied the colors all the way around the thing, and that's kind of cool. So many different ways you can go, but you got to pick your numbers right, and you're going to be limited by what you're trying to do your tubular pattern around. If you're doing something freestyle like that necklace, well, you can make that necklace any size you want to. Of course, the bigger you go, it'll collapse. It'll get kind of flat, you know. So 12, 14, yeah, 16, you're pushing it. 18, it starts to really, like, when somebody wears it, it'll just start getting flat like that. It'll pinch. Or it will when I wear it, anyway, because I'm a little hard on everything. So there you have it. That's how you do repeating patterns. That's the kind of thinking you have to do to figure it out beforehand. Try it out. Let me know how it works. For sure, if there's anything that I missed that you don't understand, let me know. I'll do some follow-up videos or whatever it takes, because I want you to get to beading. Have some fun with it. And for me, designing beads is the funnest part. Have a good one. Try out that 3x14 lighter thing. I'm all stoked. I gotta get to it. See ya.